Chapter 11. A Slap in the Face of Love. Beren turned stiffly, each step heavy as if dragging invisible chains, the sound clear yet hesitant on the cold stone. The pride of the heir to the lordship of Pike City was crushed by his father's severe punishment. The words "Howling Cape" pierced his boiling rage like cold iron hooks, leaving only a dull, humiliating pain. He had expected a flogging, a brutal but exhilarating beating, the metals of a warrior. But hard labor, cleaning barnacles like a lowly salt slave among the sun-scorched rocks? This was a trampling of his status. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the trophies gleaming in the firelight in the corner. Mir's gold coins, Kohal's silk. But now their gleam offered no solace, instead like countless mocking eyes, silently ridiculing the shame brought on by his victory. Euron, however, appeared much calmer. He glanced thoughtfully one last time at his father's straight, rock-like back, its solitary weight accentuated by the flickering firelight. He had anticipated his father's anger, and the confinement punishment was expected, even exactly what he wanted. The mountain of spoils, seemingly cursed in his father's eyes, were merely cold, exploitable resources to Euron. His gaze finally settled on Lysa, who stood quietly in the shadows of a corner. Her calm, gray-blue eyes, like two deep wells, reflected the flickering firelight in the hall, and perhaps also reflected some nascent thoughts within him. He gave her a barely perceptible nod, then turned and followed his brother. The two walked silently side by side toward the heavy door. Beren's anger and humiliation had nowhere to go, threatening to burst him apart. Just as he was about to touch the door knocker, he abruptly stopped, his large, iron-like hand gripping Euron's thin shoulder tightly. His fingers dug deep, the force so great that Euron groaned in pain, caught off guard, and stumbled backward. "You little bastard!" Beren's voice was squeezed out from between his teeth, filled with hatred that even the sea breeze couldn't dispel. His hot breath sprayed on Euron's ear. "If it weren't for you, you jinx, Father wouldn't be so angry. I would at most get a beating. Why would I have to go to Howling Cape to do hard labor?" The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, and his fingers tightened even more, as if he wanted to crush his brother's shoulder blades. Euron winced in pain, but his deep blue eyes held no fear, only cold mockery and a hint of offended anger. He endured the pain, meeting his brother's fiery gaze without flinching, his voice low and cold. "Humph! If it weren't for me, dear brother, you and your bunch of brutes would have been riddled with bullets in Havana Harbor long ago. You owe me a life. Have you forgotten so quickly? How will you repay this life-saving debt on the ancient road of the Iron Islands?" He deliberately emphasized the words, ancient road. "One thing at a time," Beren roared, like a sea beast whose sore spot had been touched. "Iron Seeds are clear about their debts. I will repay you for saving my life. But this punishment is all because of you." He stubbornly attributed all the blame to his younger brother's appearance. "Ha! What a clear!" Euron sneered, straining his shoulders to try and break free of the iron clamps. "It was your father who punished you." He felt that you, as the eldest son and the future king of the Seastone, had led the way in reckless actions, almost dragging the entire Greyjoy family into the abyss. "You were stupid. Don't blame it on me." He spoke rapidly, each word like a knife. "Pa!" Beren was furious. He spat a mouthful of saliva onto the stone ground at his feet, making a loud sound, as if that was his entire evaluation of his brother's words. He released his grip and shoved Euron hard, causing the latter to stumble a few steps. Just as the two brothers were on the verge of exploding, the atmosphere so tense it seemed about to burst into flames, King Corrin's cold and weary voice came from the depths of the hall, like a bucket of ice water being poured over them. "Enough! Before you go to your respective reefs and desks, go see your mother." Corrin didn't turn around, his voice filled with impatience and a hint of barely perceptible pain. "She cries and whines all day long because of you two reckless fools. Her eyes are almost blind from crying. Give her a break." He paused, his tone regaining its commanding coldness. "Dagmo, you stay." Beren and Euron were rooted to the spot by their father Corrin's roar. The rebuke about their mother crying until she went blind lashed their hearts like a whip. Their father didn't turn around, but his suppressed pain was heavier than any scolding. The two brothers turned in silence and headed towards their mother, Sansa Greyjoy's, room. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and a somber atmosphere. Their father's rebuke, like an invisible whip, extinguished the tension between them. Balan's anger was instantly replaced by a complex expression, a mixture of heartache for his mother, embarrassment at his father's exposure of his weakness, and a deeper sense of self-reproach. He glared at Euron, said nothing more, turned, and abruptly flung open the heavy wooden door. With lingering anger and heavy steps, he strode away into the shadows outside. Lady Sansa leaned against the cushions, her 6-month pregnant belly bulging beneath the thin blanket. Tears still clung to her pale face, and her eyes were red and swollen. Seeing her 2 sons enter, especially Balan, a surge of anger instantly overwhelmed her grief. "Baron!" Her voice was hoarse yet sharp. She suddenly sat up and, before Baron could react, slap! A loud slap landed hard on his face. The force was so great that 18-year-old Baron staggered, and clear finger marks quickly appeared on his face. "If you want to die, fine, but what are you doing taking Euron there? How old is he? Is that a place for a 5-year-old? Lady Sansa's chest heaved violently, her eyes burning with fear and rage. Baron covered his face, stubbornly holding his neck, his eyes gloomy, but he dared not contradict his mother. At that moment, Sansa's gaze swept over Euron, instantly freezing on his shoulder exposed beneath his torn sleeve. A large, horrifying purplish-blue bruise, with even a faint, white arrow scratch visible at the edge, faded from being soaked in seawater. "Gods!" Sansa gasped, her face turning deathly pale, even more so than before. She whirled towards Baron, her eyes practically spitting fire, and raised her hand, using all her remaining strength. Smack! Another, even louder slap landed heavily on Baron's other cheek. "You wretched brother! How have you taken care of your brother?" Sansa's voice was choked with sobs and despair. "Do you want to kill him? Do you want me to lose both of you?" Baron's cheeks were burning and swollen. He gritted his teeth, his fists clenched so tightly at his sides that they cracked, and his fierce gaze, like a poisoned dagger, pierced Euron. His eyes were filled with the rage of being publicly humiliated and resentment towards his brother. Euron was jolted by that gaze. His mother's protection had become the most dangerous death warrant. He knew Baron all too well. Baron might not dare to retaliate against his mother for the beating and humiliation, but he would definitely take revenge 10-fold or 100-fold. Mother, Euron said, his voice weak and panicked. His voice strained by the sharp pain in his shoulder. I'm so dizzy, and my wound hurts too. Maester Clegane said I need to change my dressing immediately. I'll go find the Maester first." He spoke so quickly that he didn't give his mother a chance to speak again or Baron a chance to retaliate. Like a startled fawn, he turned and stumbled out of the room, leaving his furious brother and his worried, weeping mother behind him. He had to get out of this powder keg immediately. Baron's eyes told him that a severe beating was only a matter of time. Chapter 12. Dagmo, which one do you value most? The door shut out the last light and sound. The vast black stone hall fell into a suffocating silence, with only the crackling of burning wood in the fireplace echoing in the emptiness, sounding particularly jarring. King Coron Tiso remained with his back to the doorway, like an ancient, unchanging rock statue, enduring the silent storm raging within him. The firelight cast flickering shadows on his broad back. Not far before him, the spoils of war, gold coins, silk, jeweled goblets, gleaming alluringly in the firelight, now exuded a cold, ironic aura, a sharp mockery of this victory. He had traded his son's adventure and the safety of the entire archipelago for nothing more than these cold, lifeless objects, and a future requiring even stronger defenses. His deep, heavy voice, imbued with the weight of iron and blood, rose slowly, as if speaking to himself, yet also as if addressing the black stone hall that bore witness to countless generations of the Greyjoy family's glory and sins. Plunder is an instinct etched into the very bones of the Ironborn, a means of survival bestowed upon us by the drowned god. His voice was particularly heavy in the silence. But foolishness, arrogant foolishness, it will gnaw at our ship's hull from within, like termites, and ultimately bury the entire archipelago. He paused for a long time, the firelight illuminating his tightly pursed lips and deep nasolabial folds, before finally letting out an almost inaudible sigh, filled with complex expectations and stern admonitions for his eldest son. "Baron, my son, I hope the waves of Howling Cape can truly wash away the arrogance in your mind." "Dagmo?" Corin's voice returned to its usual cold, commanding tone, and he still didn't turn around. "Sit down. Cracked jaw Dagmor, the old pirate who struck fear into the hearts of his enemies at sea, now appeared unusually uneasy. He nervously rubbed his calloused and scarred hands, his throat bobbing, before carefully pulling out the heavy wooden chair opposite King Coron. The chair legs scraped against the stone floor, making a harsh, grating sound that echoed in the deathly silent hall. He sat down stiffly, back ramrod straight, hands on his knees, like a prisoner awaiting trial, completely devoid of the ferocity he displayed during his piracy at sea. He stole a glance at the king's mountain-like, somber back before quickly lowering his gaze again. Now, Coron finally turned around slowly, his weathered, hawk-like eyes gleaming with a cold, oppressive light in the firelight, fixed firmly on Dagmor. Pour out everything you've been keeping inside you. Every drop of seawater, every breeze, every rock from this voyage, from beginning to end. Don't leave out a single word. Yes, Your Majesty. Dagmo took a deep breath, trying to suppress the tension in his heart. His rough voice rang out in the empty hall as he began his long and detailed report. Cracked palate Dagmo took a deep breath, as if trying to expel all the tension from his lungs, and his rough voice echoed in the silent black stone hall, where only the crackling of the fireplace could be heard. It all started when young Master Baron got his hands on that merchant ship route map at the Salty Blood Tavern. It showed the routes and times for the fat sheep, spices, silk, gems. Young Master Baron's eyes were practically bloodshot, like a shark smelling blood. Of course, I was the same, even thirstier and hungrier. He licked his chapped lips. So I gathered the crew, prepared fresh water and food, and the drinking buffalo waited for high tide to set sail. As for young Master Euron, he was only brought aboard after threatening Baron to betray him before the drinking buffalo set sail. Dagmor paused here, seemingly choosing his words carefully. Young Master Euron. After boarding the ship, he was engrossed in his tattered book, seemingly indifferent to everything. When young Master Baron made the decision to proceed, he didn't object, but he only asked one question. The map doesn't mark the escort ships, nor the depth of the water or the hidden reefs. Father taught me that plundering relies on knives and axes, but also on brains. King Coron stood with his back to him, motionless, but the flickering light of the fire seemed to freeze for a moment on his broad shoulders. Young Master Baron wouldn't listen to any of this. He just cursed, "What does that brat know?" And then he made the plan. Dagmor continued. Before he actually took action, young Master Euron, he did a few strange things. Speak. Coron's voice was like a cold reef. Dagmor lowered his voice, tinged with a confusion he himself couldn't comprehend. After capturing their tongues, young Master Baron and we were all eager to use any means necessary to pry their mouths open. Axes, skinning knives, whatever was most effective. But young Master Euron, he's different. As Dagmor described the interrogation scene, his tone unconsciously carried a hint of amazement at the efficiency. Even though the method instinctively sent a chill down his spine, he was like butchering a fish, Your Majesty. He didn't rush to chop off his finger. He circled the 3 prisoners first, examining their hands, their clothes, even their old scars. He was the one who discovered the 3-edged arrowhead scar on the mercenary prisoner's shoulder. And then, he used this. Dagmo subconsciously touched his waist. Not a knife, but rust. He scraped a handful of rust from the ship's plank and, so precisely, stuffed it into the old scar on the mercenary's shoulder. Good heavens, didn't you hear the scream? It was worse than having your finger chopped off. The mercenary immediately broke down, vomiting up the number and location of his guards, even revealing that his servants were unarmed. Coron remained with his back turned, but Dagmor felt the silent gaze grow even heavier. The most dangerous thing is that he interrogated them separately. Euron was on his first voyage, his first raid, and definitely his first time interrogating. Yet he was more skilled and thorough than us old pirates, Dagmor emphasized. Young Master Baron interrogated one, I interrogated one, and he interrogated the third. He asked the same questions, number of ships, cargo, escorts, course, and then compared their testimonies like piecing together ship planks. Your Majesty, when you interrogate them separately, if their testimonies don't match, they're lying. We've never done this before. Dagmor paused, seemingly recalling the efficient and ruthless raid. His attitude towards the prisoners. He remembered Euron's last words to them. He handed water to those half-dead guys, squatted in front of them, his voice as cold as ice, telling them how they would be skinned, cut up, and fed to see maggots if the intelligence was false, and that he could guarantee their survival if things went smoothly. His tone wasn't a threat, it was stating a fact they couldn't escape. And one of them actually got so scared he screamed, "Ghost fire!" That intelligence was something he squeezed out of them. If we hadn't known beforehand, the Haween would have rushed over, and that servant boy would have lit a fire, and we would all have turned into roasted fish. Dagmo's voice was filled with lingering fear and a hint of relief. After determining the route and the time to act, we arrived ahead of time to ambush. Young Master Yulin had a few Ironborn row a small boat to scout the narrowest section of Widow's Gorge. A glint of recollection flashed in Dagmore's single eye. Not to check the location of the reefs, we know that place well, but to check the currents. To see which reefs would be exposed enough for a person to stand on at low tide, and which channels would be submerged and become dead ends at high tide. He also had Glenn memorize the locations of the whirlpools with the strongest currents. At the time, we all thought this kid was being redundant. In a battle at sea, who cares about the currents? What about when they hijacked the ship? Corin finally spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. Young Master Baron was incredibly brave. He was the first to jump onto the merchant ship and took down the lookout with a single blow, Dagmore said hastily. Old Wick led his men to storm the cargo hold and deal with the Will-o'-the-Wisps, which was also excellent. But some details were arranged by young Master Euron. He swallowed hard. He had those men who had scouted the currents beforehand, carrying poisoned arrows coated with owl dung, lie prone on the rocks exposed at low tide. The location was tricky, and the current was strong. The merchant ship would never suspect anyone could hide there. The arrows were fired silently and with remarkable effect. Also, he had Glenn and his men block not the main deck, but the waterway exits that would be flooded at high tide. As a result, 2 guards who tried to jump overboard to escape actually ran in and drowned in the dead end. And that little girl. Dagmo hesitated for a moment, then continued, Lisa, young Master Baron chose the salt concubine according to the rules, but young Master Euron took the youngest one, a girl from Pentos as thin as a reed. He said he wouldn't be a salt concubine, but a maid. We all laughed at him for trying to order around a maid before he was even fully grown up, but later, on the ship, I heard that little girl talking to him in a language we couldn't understand, and young Master Euron was actually imitating her. The tone was very strange, like a snake hissing or a dragon roaring. It was some kind of high veil language. Advanced Varese. Dagmo's voice trailed off. He felt he had already revealed too many details about the cunning boy. He glanced up furtively. King Coron remained with his back to him, like an unchanging black reef, with only the flickering light of the fire casting shadows on him. The hall was deathly silent, save for Dagmo's heavy breathing and the crackling of the burning wood. After a long while, when Dagmo was almost suffocating, Corin's deep voice slowly rang out, carrying a heavy tone born of deep thought. Acting like dissecting a fish, judging an enemy like observing its patterns, using their weakness, not their strength, observing them separately, verifying them together. Even the flow of water, old scars, and the will to survive in people's hearts can be used as weapons. He seemed to be summarizing, or perhaps chewing on these unfamiliar qualities, and also knowing to learn advanced Varethian. King Corin finally turned around slowly, his hawk-like eyes sharp as knives in the firelight, piercing Dagmo. Dagmo, tell me, an Ironborn, a Greyjoy, what do you need these for? With a half-smile, he said, You seem to value Euron highly? Of course, Euron is the king's son. That's all. Dagmo was speechless, feeling a chill run down his spine. He opened his mouth, but in the end, he just lowered his head in fear, not daring to look into the king's all-seeing gaze. In the storm, young Master Euron seemed possessed by a drowning god who could control the sea. I saw him wearing the crown of the Grey Sea King. In the hall, only the spoils of war remained, their cold, eerie light gleaming silently in the firelight, amidst a profound, ocean-like silence. Chapter 13 Valyrian. The air atop the Park City Library Tower was thick with dust, mustiness, and the lingering scent of sea salt. A meager sliver of light peeked through narrow, arrow-shaped windows, barely illuminating the yellowed parchment piled on the oak table and the rough copying paper before Euron. The rustling of quills across paper was the dominant sound, occasionally broken by the slight clinking of inkwells or the distant roar of waves. Lisa sat quietly opposite Euron, like a small salt sculpture. 3 heavy books lay open before her, the scrolls of the drowned gods, the history of the Ironborn, and the laws of the Iron Islands. Her gray-blue eyes darted between the pages and Euron's unrestrained handwriting, fulfilling the overstudent duty entrusted to her by King Coron, ensuring not a single word was wrong and no perfunctory work. Euron was copying the doomsday prophecy of the Great Drowning from the ancient scroll of drowning gods. The ink on his pen blurred into a chaotic mess, much like the thoughts stirred by the dark doctrines in the book. He suddenly stopped writing, his gaze shifting from the stain on the paper to Lisa's serene face. "Lisa," his voice broke the silence, with a hint of deliberate casualness. "You said you speak 7 languages." Euron had always been curious about this maid, but with so many people on the ship, there hadn't been a chance to chat and probe properly. Now, however, it was just the two of them. Lisa raised her head, met his gaze, and nodded gently. "Yes, Lord Euron. Higher Valyrian." Euron's fingers tapped unconsciously on the table, making a soft knocking sound. "That phrase you said on the deck, Valardo Harris. What did it mean?" He mimicked her pronunciation, not perfectly, but capturing the strange rhythm. "All men must be served," Lisa answered clearly, her voice like a gentle breeze across the sea. "Serve." Euron's lips curled into a playful smile. "Serve whom? The drowned god? The 7 gods? Or some dragon king?" He deliberately emphasized the last 2 words, with a hint of barely perceptible provocation. Lisa's expression remained unchanged. This is a common greeting among the Bravos, and also used to express humility. Its original meaning is that all mortals are destined to serve some higher purpose or being. The object of service depends on the speaker's beliefs and stance. Her common was fluent and precise, with a soft Pentos accent. "A higher purpose?" Euron repeated softly, his gaze sweeping over the text in the drowned scrolls about the whispers of the abyss and the destruction of the end times. "The drowned god says that he reveals his wisdom in the bubbles of the drowned. Do you say that the drowned god whispers in Valyrian?" His question carried an almost blasphemous curiosity. Lisa paused for a moment, seemingly choosing her words carefully. "The whispers of the drowned gods perhaps transcend any mortal language, Lord Euron. But Valyrian, it is the legacy of the ancient freehold, the language of dragons and magic, the vessel of many ancient knowledge and secrets. It itself may contain the key to some higher purpose." Her answer was both cautious and profound. A glint of light flashed in Euron's eyes. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. "Teach me," he commanded directly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Yet a pure thirst for knowledge burned deep within his eyes, a rarity among him. Lisa did not immediately agree or refuse, but simply looked at him quietly. "Copying is King Coron's order, Lord Euron. Time is of the essence." "Time?" Euron scoffed, pointing to the pile of books and manuscripts. "We've been locked up in this dusty tower filled with mad ramblings for a whole month. Copying is punishment. Studying," he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice, "is a pastime, a key. Teach me a few words and I'll pretend. The ink's too thick and I need a break." He picked up the ink bottle and shook it gently. Lisa's gaze lingered on his face for a few seconds, seemingly assessing his resolve and the deeper meaning behind his request. Finally, she nodded slightly. "As you wish, but only during breaks from copying, and you must complete your daily quota." Yoluin had just finished copying a passage from the ancient scroll of drowned gods, about the prayer for a water burial ceremony. "What is your name? Where do you go? What do you want?" Put down his pen and shook his aching wrist. "How do you say name in Valyrian?" he asked immediately. "Hen," pronounced similarly to hate, but with a flatter tone, Lisa said clearly. "Hen?" Euron repeated, savoring the short, forceful syllable on his tongue. "And the drowning god? What do you Pentos or Bravos call him?" "The drowning gods of the Iron Islands don't have a specific name in Valyrian," Lisa replied, "but they can be described. The god of saltwater is Anagar Zobri, and the lord of the abyss is Daraslenton." "Anagar Zobri, Daraslenton." Euron imitated with great interest. These syllables were more complex and mysterious than the rough language of the Ironkin, as if they contained power. "It sounds more weighty than drowning god," he commented, a strange light gleaming in his eyes. Lisa opened the history of the Ironborn and pointed to a rough illustration depicting the black stone castle on Pike Island. Stone in Valyrian is Dares, which shares the same root as lord. It means solid, eternal, and domineering. Euron's gaze swept over the rugged pike castle in the illustration, then fell upon the faintly visible black stone tower outside the window. Dares, he murmured thoughtfully. The ruling stone. Drowned god is the lord of the abyss, pike is the ruling stone. Interesting. He picked up a quill and hastily wrote Dares and Lenton in the margins of the manuscript. Euron stopped again when he reached the passage in the history of the Iron Seeds describing a bloody family feud. The pages were filled with words like chopped with an axe, drowned, and betrayal. Blood, he said, looking at Lisa. Valerian. Cinder, Lisa replied. Cinder, Lisa replied. Cinder, Euron murmured, feeling the word carry a metallic scent. Knife or sword? Tegan generally refers to a sharp weapon, and sword is Vala, Lisa added. Valyrio steel swords are called Valyrio Tegan, which means Valyrio blade. Euron's eyes sharpened instantly as he recalled the several lesser Valyrian steel daggers among the spoils. Valyrio Tegan, he repeated, his fingers tracing lines on the table, as if sensing the legendary blade. Sounds more deadly, more precious than the dragon steel the Ironborn spoke of. He paused, a calculating glint in his eyes. Lisa, knowledge is power. How do you say that in Higher Valyrian? Lisa paused slightly, seemingly unprepared for the question, but quickly answered fluently, Ruklandorn Henhenkari, knowledge is the foundation of power. Ruklandorn Henhenkari? Euron repeated slowly, word by word, as if trying to etch each syllable into his very bones. He stared at Lisa, the smile on his lips deepening, growing colder. Well said. Continue copying. He picked up his pen again, but the words beneath seemed to carry a new weight and sharpness. When Euron reached the cold, hard note in the Iron Islands law concerning the felony of breaking oaths and the transience of promises made to landmen, a glint of light flashed in his eyes. He slammed down his pen, splashing ink everywhere. Law? He asked eagerly. Valerian. Riptra, Lisa replied. Chain? Henkiri, hate-basri, is the same word as foundation in foundation of power. Oath? Avi. Sand? Kpa. Euron quickly jotted down these words in the margins of the manuscript. Riptra, law, Henkiri, chain/foundation, Avi, oath, Kpa, sand. He stared at the words, then glanced at the note in the book, and suddenly burst into a low, jubilant laugh, jarringly loud in the silent tower. Riptra Henkari, laws are chains, but Avi Kpa, oaths are like sand. Especially oaths to landmen. He pointed to the words, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of discovering a loophole in the rules. Lisa, do you see? It's written in cold, hard words that promises to landmen can slip through your fingers like sand. And Valyrian, it proves it with sound. Avi Kpa, oaths are like sand. How apt. Lisa looked at the excited Euron, then at the Valyrian words he had written on the edge of the page. A complex emotion seemed to flicker deep in her gray-blue eyes. Was it alertness, worry, or some kind of understanding of this dangerous wisdom? She said softly, words are frozen sound, Lord Euron, and sound is fluid. The meaning of an oath sometimes lies in the person who speaks it, sometimes in the person who hears it, and sometimes only in the wind. Euron's laughter subsided, and he gave Lisa a deep look, as if truly scrutinizing the little girl he had chosen from among the captives for the first time. The flowing sound, he murmured, savoring the word. Well said, Lisa. Very good. He said nothing more, picked up his pen again, and began copying the remaining legal texts. But his handwriting was more deliberate, as if he were not tracing words, but rather the blueprints of some weapon he was about to master. His lips always held that cold, all-knowing smile, one that seemed poised to exploit everything. When the last stroke was finished, Euron put down his quill, his fingers stained black with ink and the rough paper. Lisa carefully examined the 3 copies of his manuscript, which were written in a wild but surprisingly complete style, and confirmed that they were correct. Only the eternal roar of the waves remained in the tower, pouring in through the narrow window openings, like the distant sigh of the drowning god, or the lingering breath of the ancient Valyrian dragon. Chapter 14, The Mysterious Maid. Euron leaned back in the cold stone chair and closed his eyes. His mind was no longer filled with the simple whispers of the drowned god or the roars of the iron-born ancestors. The strange syllables of Valyrian, Hen, noun. Anagar-Zobri, god of saltwater. Dares, stone/lord. Cinder, blood. Valerio Tegan, Valyrian blade. Rooklyn Dornhen Henkari, knowledge is the foundation of power. Riptra law, Avi Kipa, oaths as sand. Intertwined with the destructive prophecies of the Drowned Scrolls, the violent cycles of the Ironborn Chronicles, and the cold logic of the Iron Islands laws, forming a completely new and unsettling cognitive map. The drowned gods are the cold, abyssal framework. History is the cyclical trajectory of power, and the law is a lever written by humans, capable of being pried open. Valyrian language, however, is the mysterious key to deciphering all of this, and perhaps even reconstructing it. He opened his eyes, his gaze falling on Lisa. She was quietly closing the heavy book, The Laws of the Iron Islands. Her movements gentle yet carrying a sense of finality. Valardo Harris, Lisa? Euron suddenly said in his still, somewhat broken high Valyrian, breaking the silence. Lisa paused for a moment, raised her deep gray-blue eyes that seemed to see right through people, and looked at him quietly. Euron's lips slowly curved upwards, forming a cold and meaningful arc. His deep blue eyes were like the sea before a storm, unfathomable and unfathomable. Valardo Harris, all mortals must serve, but to whom should they serve? And in what way? He deliberately slowed his speech, his gaze sharply locking onto Lisa. In Valyrian, is there a word that can answer this question? Lisa did not answer. She simply watched him silently, like a deep, unfathomable sea, its surface calm and still, yet turbulent beneath. In her gray-blue eyes, there was no fear, no panic, only an almost frozen stillness. However, beneath this stillness, Euron detected a very subtle ripple. Not a wavering, but more like a heightened assessment under heightened vigilance. She was like a poisoned dagger hidden beneath luxurious velvet, seemingly harmless, yet instinctively sharpened. She was fluent in 7 languages, her diction precise and elegant, far surpassing that of commoners. The restrained aristocratic air she exuded in her every movement, even amidst the terror of captivity, did not completely dissipate. Faced with the cruel torture of skinning and severing fingers, and the brutality of the Iron People, she maintained an inexplicable composure. And then there was the adamantine dagger inlaid with a dull blue sapphire, which she had cleverly concealed, yet Euron had caught a glimpse of in the chaos, a weapon no ordinary maidservant could possess for self-defense. Its ancient and peculiar design suggested a token of status or a symbol of inheritance. All the clues, like scattered pearls, were instantly pieced together by Euron's exceptionally sharp mind. This little girl, Lisa, who claimed to be from Pentos and whose parents were merchants from Bravos and Rise. Her identity was definitely not as simple as she made it sound. Ha ha ha! Euron suddenly burst into a deep, hearty laugh, shattering the almost frozen silence in the tower. The laughter echoed between the stone walls, carrying a wild, unrestrained air of all-knowing control. He abruptly stood up, his tall figure casting an oppressive shadow in the cramped space. But his gaze towards Lisa was not one of scrutiny or suspicion, but rather a strange, almost burning excitement. Everyone has secrets, Lisa. Euron's voice was now powerful, no longer the clear, boyish tone, but carrying an undeniable penetrating force, as if proclaiming a truth. You hide the mystery of your origins, your dagger, and perhaps even your past. That's good. He took a step forward, closing in on Lisa, but without the slightest hint of threat, instead admiring her as if she were a rare treasure. Fear? Suspicion? Those are emotions of the weak, the prerogative of salt slaves and land sheep. He spread his arms wide, his posture wild and confident, as if embracing the entire world. I, Euron Greyjoy, am destined for great things. My ship will sail to seas where even the drowning gods have never set foot. My throne will not be built from this pile of black stones of Pike Island. His gaze was intense, locked onto Lisa's eyes, which finally showed genuine emotion at his words. What use is a weeping, obedient handmaiden to me? What I need is a key, someone who can open ancient doors, decipher lost scrolls, and understand the whispers of dragons. Euron looked down at Lisa, his cold, meaningful smile transforming into pure, almost greedy admiration and ambition. Your secret? Let it continue to be your armor, your blade. As long as it serves me, serves the great goal we are about to embark on. His tone was resolute, carrying a maturity beyond his years, an almost imperial composure and confidence. Your past belongs to the shadows? Then let it remain in the shadows. What I want is your present and future. Your brilliant mind, your tongue that speaks 7 languages, your hand that holds the dagger. Offer them to me, Lisa. Serve me. And what I can give you is far more than just living. I will give you a place where even your hidden identity pales in comparison. In my story, you will no longer be a nameless prisoner, but an indispensable chapter. His words struck Lisa like a thunderclap. It wasn't merely a pardon or exploitation. It was an affirmation of her value, of her hidden power, even an affirmation of the legitimacy of her secret existence. This magnanimity, this mindset of viewing secrets as resources rather than threats, completely surpassed Lisa's understanding of the Ironborn, and even most nobles. This was no longer the taciturn boy, but a burgeoning potential monarch with terrifying ambition and astonishing capacity for tolerance. Conqueror's haki also played its maximum role at this moment. Lisa's pupils contracted slightly, and for the first time, a noticeable crack appeared in her composed mask. Shock, confusion, a flicker of being seen through, and an indescribable tremor ignited by this grand and dangerous vision, intertwined and churned deep within her gray-blue eyes. Looking at the boy before her, radiating an astonishing aura of oppression and allure, she truly realized for the first time that she might have stepped into the center of a vortex far deeper and more dangerous than becoming a salt concubine or a slave. And at the center of that vortex were Euron Greyjoy's eyes, burning with wildfire. The anticipated fear or panic did not prevail. Instead, a dizzying feeling of being forcibly dragged into a grand scheme, and a hidden and dangerous flame of excitement ignited by that indispensable chapter. As the ancient Giscalus said, mortal language, mortal questions, mortal answers. Valyrian higher language. All men must be served. I know, to whom and in what manner they are served. It is up to the servants and the kings. Dothraki? I have seen many storms and many Khaleesi, queens. If a storm seeks to destroy a Khaleesi, if a storm seeks to destroy the Dothraki, it will first destroy me. Finally, she looked at Euron again, switching back to common tongue, her voice regaining its previous gentleness, yet containing an undeniable power. Lord Euron, there is no single word in Valyrian to answer your question, for the answer must be written, not sought. She paused slightly, her gray-blue eyes flashing with wisdom and a hint of barely perceptible challenge. You seek a key, and I may be one of them, but the value of a key lies not only in what doors it can open, but also in whether the holder possesses sufficient strength to face whatever may lie beyond, whether it be lost treasure or an all-consuming abyss. Lisa didn't finish her sentence, but simply bowed slightly, a simple yet ancient and elegant gesture, like a scholar bowing to a potential patron, rather than a maid bowing to her master. Then, the answer to serving will naturally become clear, like a reef after the tide has receded. Until then, Lisa will be your key to deciphering Valyrian, and another pair of eyes for you to observe the world. Her reply ended there. There was no promise of loyalty, no revelation of secrets, yet a clear line was drawn. She saw Euron's ambition and potential, and was willing to temporarily take refuge under his wing, offering her value, language, observation. But she tightly bound her serving to Euron's own growth in power and whether he could provide genuine protection. She implied herself as an observer, an assessor, not a simple dependent. She accepted the future possibilities Euron painted, not his current identity or commands. At the same time, the warning about the abyss behind the door was both a reminder to Euron and a re-emphasis on her own value. The door she, the key, could open might lead to unexpected dangers. This response, woven from 4 languages and brimming with wisdom, metaphor, and self-respect, carries far more weight than any simple yes or no. It seemed to freeze the air within the tower, leaving only a clash of gazes between the 2 men, one burning with ambition and a desire for control, the other with profound wisdom and a conditional willingness to cooperate. The roar of the waves became the grandest background music to this silent contest. Euron slowly clapped his hands, the applause echoing crisply between the stone walls, carrying undisguised appreciation and admiration. A storm of words that even the gods have never heard of. Euron's voice rang out. The ancient sounds of Githzerai, the covenants of Valyria, the fierce winds of the Dothraki, and the wisdom of the common tongue. Lisa, Lisa, you are more radiant than I ever imagined. You say the answer needs to be written? Perfect for me. History is the confession of the weak, while the future will be rewritten by the strong with iron and fire. You say power needs a foundation? He pointed sharply to the pile of copied tomes and Valyrian vocabulary on the margins. Knowledge? That's just the beginning. I need a lever that can move the world. And you say, protection? Euron's gaze sharpened like a knife, staring directly at Lysa. The storm will destroy me first? No, you're wrong. A true storm will not destroy its allies. It will engulf them, empower them, and let them dance on the crest of the wave. The answer to service? It will emerge clearly, little by little, as we conquer seas, decipher secrets, and master powers. It's not that the tide recedes to reveal the reefs, but that we ourselves raise new land from the abyss. You will be a witness, Lysa. He no longer waited for Lysa's reply, as if her cooperation was already a foregone conclusion. He turned and walked to the oak table piled with books, his posture calm and powerful, as if he had just completed an important negotiation and was confident that he had won the most valuable bargaining chip. Chapter 15: The Iron Islands Dilemma. On the table, several parchment scrolls brought by ravens lay scattered, containing messages from King's Landing recorded in the maester's neat handwriting. Some were from several years ago, others more recent, and Euron slowly sorted through the intelligence sent by the ravens according to the timeline. The Rebellion of Duskwood. Aerys II is imprisoned, and Barristan Selmy single-handedly rescues him. The king is released, but suffers a severe emotional trauma. Follow-up: the Mad King, the word was euphemistically described in the Maester's report as His Majesty is troubled, developed serious doubts about Lord Tywin Lannister's loyalty, believing that his deliberate delay in the rescue was a sign of treachery. A rift had formed between the two. Addendum: the letter also mentions that, in response to ubiquitous conspiracies and betrayals, His Majesty Aerys II recruited a eunuch named Varys from Rhys across the Narrow Sea and appointed him as Chief of Intelligence. This man, known for his cunning and secretive methods and nicknamed the Eight-Clawed Spider, has begun to weave a vast intelligence network covering the court and even the Seven Kingdoms, and enjoys the deep trust of the Mad King. Latest: the Mad King rejected Tywin Lannister's proposal for Prince Rhaegar to marry Cersei Lannister, instead announcing that the prince would be engaged to Princess Elia Martell of Dorne. Meanwhile, the Mad King repeatedly and publicly mocked Tywin at court, referring to him as a squire king, inflicting severe humiliation. History hasn't changed, that's good news, Euron murmured silently to himself, his fingertips tracing the name Aerys II on the parchment. The shadow of Duskwood had already loomed over the Dragon King in 273 AC, and the humiliation of being rejected in 275 AC arrived as expected. Tywin Lannister, the Warden of the West, whose emblem was the Golden Lion and whose power was immense, must have felt his heart filled with icy venom at this moment. 270 AC, Euron Greyjoy is born. 273 AC, the Duskwood Rebellion. The Mad King is imprisoned, but Barristan rescues him. The Mad King suspects Tywin, and a rift develops. 275 AC. The Mad King rejects Prince Rhaegar's proposal to marry Cersei Lannister, instead announcing that the prince will be engaged to Princess Elia Martell of Dorne. He insults Tywin by calling him the Squire King. The rift deepens. 281 AC. The Mad King forcibly recruits Jaime into the Kingsguard. He strips Tywin Lannister of his heir. The rift is irreparable. 282 AC. Rhaegar kidnaps Lyanna Stark. The Mad King brutally murders Rickard and Brandon Stark. The War of the Usurpers breaks out. 283 AC. The Battle of the Trident. Rhaegal dies. The Mad King buries Wildfire to burn the city. Jaime kills the king. Robert becomes king. Euron wrote the message in Chinese on parchment, tapping lightly on 283 AC with his fingers. Lysa, standing behind him, looked at the unfamiliar characters Euron had written with curiosity. 275 283 AC. 8 years. 8 more years, Euron murmured, his young chest pounding with the anxiety and excitement of a grown-up warlord. The War of the Usurpers. Westeros will be plunged into unprecedented chaos and bloodshed. This will be a golden opportunity for the Iron Islands to break free of the chains of the Barons and let the name of the drowned god resound throughout the Seven Kingdoms. But the prerequisite is that the Iron Islands must have enough power to seize this opportunity, rather than be overthrown in the storm. My current problem is, How can I maximize the strength of the Iron Islands by making the most of the 8 golden years from 275 AC to 282 AC? Charles Kettering once said, "A problem is half solved when it is clearly stated." Euron sighed, analyzing the current situation of the Iron Islands, listing each problem on parchment. The Iron Islands possess a strong naval tradition and culture, the worship of the drowned god, the ancient way spirit, a deeply ingrained culture of plunder, and warriors, iron-born, renowned for their bravery, ruthlessness, and fearlessness. The drowned god faith imbues plunder with a sacredness, and the iron-born possess superb seafaring skills. Generations have made their living from the sea, boasting the finest sailors and navigators, familiar with the narrow sea and the sunset sea, adept at navigating rough seas. A longship fleet, possessing a large number of longships suitable for plunder, fast, shallow draft, and maneuverable, capable of penetrating deep into shoals and rivers. The Iron Islands are geographically isolated. Situated in the sea west of Westeros, surrounded by treacherous waters, they are easy to defend and difficult to attack. Invading them would be extremely costly, yielding nothing but stones and salt. Historically, there has never been an external invasion of the Iron Islands. Secondly, the Iron Islands are surrounded by numerous reefs. The islands are surrounded by hidden reefs, forming a natural defensive line, making it extremely easy for those unfamiliar with the sea routes to run aground and sink. The Iron Islands' natural resources consist of only 3: iron ore, salt, and fish. Iron ore, especially abundant on Great Wake Island, which forms the basis of weapons, tools, and some trade. Salt. Salt production is an important industry and traded commodity, although less valuable than gold. Fisheries provide a basic food source: fish, seaweed. The warriors of the Iron Islands are martial, with men generally receiving combat training. They are known for their fierce and valiant nature, making them highly effective in boarding actions and close-quarters combat. Moreover, their warriors possess a fearless spirit unmatched by the other 6 nations. Their belief in the drowning god makes them less afraid of death than soldiers on the mainland. However, the Iron Islands also lacked many other things which gave Euron a major headache. Farmland is scarce. The land is barren and stony, with a harsh climate, unsuitable for large-scale agriculture. 90% of their food supply relies on imports or plunder. So, without food, what will they eat? Insufficient forest resources. The lack of high-quality timber restricts the development of the shipbuilding industry. Shipbuilding timber is heavily reliant on imports or plunder. So, without wood, how can ships be built? There is iron ore, but there are no blacksmiths to turn the iron ore into equipment and weapons. Limited population. The total population of the archipelago is far less than that of any major kingdom on the mainland. Limited manpower makes it impossible to support large-scale land wars or long-term occupation. The small population base makes it even more unsuitable for a protracted war. Internally fragmented. The main islands, Pike, Great Wake, Old Wake, Harlow, etc., are ruled by different families: Greyjoy, Drummer, Stonehouse, Harlow, etc. And although nominally subservient to the King of Seastone, Greyjoy, competition and internal strife exist. The Old Path emphasizes individual bravery and plunder, resulting in low cohesion, a lack of unity, lack of administrative management. The 7 islands are loosely distributed, so there is a lack of efficient bureaucratic systems for taxation, logistics, intelligence, etc. Disorganization. Due to its remote geographical location, it has a weaker ability to proactively obtain core intelligence from the mainland, such as court politics and large-scale military mobilizations, making it easy for mainland forces to ignore it or for it to be left behind by information gaps, leading to a lack of information and an inability to seize the initiative. The crackling fire in the fireplace reflected Euron Greyjoy's contemplative, heterochromatic eyes. Finally, and most importantly, everything that followed required the leadership and decision-making of his father, the King of the Iron Islands. How to persuade his father was the biggest challenge. Coron Greyjoy, the ruler of the Iron Islands, had a vision that wasn't without merit. The Iron Islands needed change, needed to shed their inescapable poverty and isolation. His goal, to integrate into the 7 kingdoms, end the bloody ancient road, and embrace peace and prosperity, sounded so bright and righteous. However, the problem is that the father wants to achieve instant success. Liberate all the slaves on the island? Euron sighed silently, his fingertips tapping unconsciously on the cold stone table. The thought itself was filled with the light of benevolence, but reality was a cruel reef. The iron mines of Pike Isle, the volcanic mines of Great Wake Isle, the salt flats of Salt Hill Isle. The arduous labor that sustained the fragile lifeline of the Iron Islands was now mostly on the shoulders of slaves. If they were liberated, who would wield the heavy pickaxes? Who would toil in the scorching salt flats? Did his father expect those iron-born lords, accustomed to paying iron money and piloting longships, to immediately roll up their sleeves and go down into the mines to dig for salt? The economy would collapse in an instant, more thoroughly than any storm. Completely abandon the ancient roads? This is tantamount to cutting into the very foundation. Euron acknowledged that the ancient roads were barbaric, unsustainable, and one of the root causes of the Iron Islands' poverty. But his father seemed to have forgotten, or rather underestimated, what paying iron money meant to the vast majority of iron-born families. It was not merely a way of life, but a part of the honor and faith ingrained in their blood. Abruptly severing this economic umbilical cord that had sustained them for millennia was tantamount to draining 80% of the Iron Islands' lifeblood. Where would the anger and confusion of those captains and sailors, who had lost their targets for plunder and their legitimate source of income, turn? Probably not to the Lannister gold mines, but to Pike City itself. Invite the Seven Gods monks to the island? Spread the Seven Gods' faith. Euron was a man without faith, or rather, a man who believed in any god, regardless of their origin. Any god who brought him benefits was a good god. The faith in the drowned gods had been rooted in this land soaked by salt water for millennia. It had shaped the souls of the Ironborn, their maxims, their way of life, and even their unique understanding of death. Did father really think that a few monks in silk robes, holding the seven-star Bible, reciting a few prayers on the rocks, could make those drowned priests, who had just baptized their newborns with the icy seawater, bow down in submission? Could they make the Ironborn, accustomed to fighting in the waves and seeking glory in plunder, turn to the father and the mother in devout prayer? This was utterly absurd. Moreover, even if the Ironborn did convert, so what? The deep-seated prejudices of Westeros would see this as a hypocritical performance, a clumsy disguise of a savage pirate's lair. Would the nobles of King's Landing, the knights of the Reach, and the lords of the North suddenly open their arms and regard the Ironborn as devout brothers just because the Iron Islands have come to believe in the Seven? No, they would only laugh, or become even more wary, warn that these iron sea monsters in sheep's clothing are up to some new trick. Opening the ports was one of the few truly brilliant ideas in father's plan. The Iron Islands needed external connections and the lifeblood of trade. However, prejudice was a mountain more towering and colder than Kuroshio Island. On the cognitive map of all merchants in the Seven Kingdoms, the words Iron Islands were always marked as pirate's lair, dangerous waters, and one-way trips. Father opened the ports and erected lighthouses, but which merchant ship laden with cargo would dare gamble its life and fortune on the goodwill of the Ironborn? Who could guarantee that their ship wouldn't be paid iron money at night? Who could believe that those sharp-eyed Ironborn with scarred faces on the docks wouldn't brandish axes at any moment? Without the foundation of trust, even the best port is just an empty berth, listening to the futile crashing of the waves. The father was too hasty. He saw the alluring light of the finish line, but ignored the thorny, turbulent path beneath his feet. He tried to smash the shackles of 1,000 years with a heavy hammer, but he didn't consider that when that hammer fell, it might first shatter the very rock he was standing on. Reform requires the patience of peeling back layers, the precision of surgery, and the wisdom of slowly boiling a frog in water. Euron's gaze fell upon the somber sea outside the window. True change should be like the tide eroding a reef, slow and steady. It shouldn't capsize the entire ship all at once, but rather subtly adjust the angle of the sails, carefully replace the rotten wood on the keel, and patiently carve out new tributaries along the course. It requires time, strategy, and step-by-step proof that the new path can indeed bring more abundant salt and iron than the old road. It requires using tangible benefits and greater power to persuade, to divide, and ultimately to replace those stubborn reefs. The father wanted to reach the destination directly, but Euron saw a long journey that required careful planning and meticulous steps. The Iron Islands, this dilapidated ship, needed not a catastrophic storm, but a skilled navigator who knew how to use the tides and winds to carefully guide it away from the treacherous shoals known as the Ancient Way.